Hello, everyone. Merry Christmas. There's a part of me that when I was planning on doing this whole series was looking at it going, am I seriously going to be doing this on Christmas too? And yeah, when I say I'm going to follow through on something, I seem to have some kind of iron will that just goes, yeah, I can just machine through this. I've been learning a lot about the limitations of that, especially over the last couple of years. But it's nice to have that kind of strength. It's nice to have that kind of stability of being able to say this will happen and to know that it'll happen. But it's a little weird to go, oh, I'm going to sneak off at some point and do this on Christmas. So we got the Christmas hat today. Because I feel like it, although I might take it off after a while. So yeah, today I want to go into a puzzle that that is very alive for me. It's very active. I'm not even sure I can say it clearly, but it was actually showing up for me just this morning in my connecting with my partner, sorting out some stuff and attention between us. This was a very mild one, having to do with some timing. We were trying to coordinate talking much earlier than we normally do, and there was a bit of miscommunication that resulted in yeah, originally I was going to do this live stream early in my morning, either right before or right after we talk, and I couldn't coordinate with her about exactly when we were talking. And so I ended up waiting. And so that created a lot of anger for me. Um, and it's perfectly reasonable on her end too, and we sorted it out. Um, but this brought up a lot of really rich and beautiful stuff in our connection. And it just seemed like I'm not sure how to extract the details of it and share that here in a way that I feel good about, because I don't want to, as much as I like being transparent, I don't want to be transparent about all of the details of my relationship with my partner. That's between us. But there was something about that that really lit up something for me that I see over and over and over and over again throughout my life. And it's been getting especially loud and clear lately. It feels like I have one puzzle, just one puzzle that keeps showing up over and over and over again. I imagine this impression will change about, oh, no, there's also these 5 others that are really key. But I have some, like both an intuition and also some theoretical reasons to orient this as pretty central to, like as I've made resolution towards this, I've felt a lot of kind of centering, a kind of orientation. So I want to share some of that challenge and to make some sort of effort to make this really grounded. Because in me, it's all energy. It's an energetic thing now. I have enough examples that I've been able to hone in on the feelings in my body, and then I notice it in real time. So it's not theorized in terms of concretes, but I'll try to make it concrete here. So one example of where this showed up many years ago was when I was running workshop classes, and the whole energy I was putting into helping to design and run these workshops. These are personal development workshops. These are run through the Center for Applied Rationality, a company that I helped to build and run for about 7 years. And in there was this huge emphasis of, well, how do we really help people? How do we help people to live better lives, to think more clearly, to be more effective? And I kept running into a puzzle that I didn't resolve very well at all at any of the time that I was there. This puzzle shows up as, on the one hand, if you sort of look through the world, obviously something is needed. Right? Something is needed. There's something like clarity of thought or clarity of heart or spiritual deepening or something. Something is needed. Right? Because if we want to have a good world, I think doing more of the same thing that we've been doing probably isn't going to work. That'll probably just, I don't know, destroy all of modern civilization. Doesn't seem like a good direction. But on the other hand, part of the thing that we're stuck in is this like part of what it seems, one of the essential pieces of learning to think clearly and being able to cut through BS and being able to be open-hearted and warm. I didn't emphasize this so much while I was at CFAR. In retrospect, I think that was a deep mistake. I think it's there was an attempt to address problems of lack of clarity of thinking by giving cognitive tools. And in retrospect, I think this was just an error. Because the problems in cognition are not at the cognitive level, they're expressed at the cognitive level. It's like trying to deal with a cold by giving people nose clips. That's not the issue. So the issue is that a big chunk of it has to do with how people outsource their thinking to systems that are unreliable. They outsource their sense of intuition and safety to authorities and to systems that don't really work very well. So it used to be that the thing you do in order to live a good life is that you go to college, you get a degree, and then you go into a job, and then you work in that job and develop a retirement plan while spending sensibly. And this lets you build up a kind of life basis to get a home, have a family. And then in the course of doing that, over the course of a couple of decades, the social infrastructure you have combined with the way that you've gone into the social contract by following through on these points lets you live a comfortable life, and then you can retire, you don't have to keep working, and you have a nest egg that allows you, along with Social Security, some kind of questions about the details, but like something in there, you know, like a little bit of space. And then you're good. Okay? And if you have trouble in your life, typically, so goes the story, it's because you're sort of falling off of the standard narrative that culture is meant to support you in. Right? So then the question is, well, how do we bring you back onto the narrative? Even if you're a little bit late, let's see what we can do. I mean, if you're way too late or you're not paying enough attention, we don't know if we can help you, but let's try. Right? And then let's see what we can do to help get everybody on board with this social plan. That's sort of like the plan of the United States, at least as it was 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago now. Like right after World War II, this is my impression of what the standard plan was, so to speak. So the problem is that a bunch of those narrative pieces are still there. Like, oh, you need to trust authorities, you need to do the thing that makes sense, but there's too much disruption. There's been too much disruption for a couple of decades now. That plan hasn't worked the entire 21st century. So, and a lot of people are waking up to this fact that most people are just shanked in this plan. If you're a programmer, you're okay. But the reason you're okay if you're a programmer is because the wealth is enormously disproportionately shifted around. So how do you deal with it? So in this kind of environment, what you need in order to navigate is not more faith in authority, more discipline. That's the old story. You actually need a lot more flexibility and an ability to discern what is worth listening to and what to cut through. But if, as one of the teachers at this workshop, I just take on the mantle of authority and tell people what they should think or even how to think, there's something very broken about that at a very fundamental level. Because I'm still coming in with, I know what you need to hear. And if the problem is that other people, that our culture as a whole is not taking sovereignty into their emotional core, and as a result, we don't have people who even have the emotional stability needed to think for themselves. Like, even if they know how to, even if they're smart enough, even if they have the tools to, they don't have the emotional core needed to address the shame and the difficulty and to pull out of the cultural momentum. Right? If they don't have that, it doesn't matter what tools they give them. So there's this tension between, let me help you, but let me honor your sovereignty. Okay? Because if I just honor the sovereignty and I go, well, you know what? The best thing I can do for you is let you figure out how to live your life. Well, how about I just don't interact with you and just trust you to do your own thing? Done. Well, you know, I was doing that before I was running CFAR. So that's interesting. But if I'm like, what does it mean to help? How can I help people without undermining their capacity to stand on their own feet. What does it mean to help people own their sovereignty? That part's harder. That part's a lot harder. Right? There are lots and lots of manifestations of this. One of them, one of the that one's a little spicier than I think it's. Is it important? Yeah. There's a way that I can spice things up having to do with interactions, like the sexual dynamics between men and women. I'll let you let you draw the connections there if you like, but there's a challenge there. There's a big challenge there, and I will say enough there to say that I think that there is a wide-scale issue where neither men nor women, and again, this is like if you don't identify with being a man or a woman, that's fine. Then this doesn't apply to you. But neither men nor women know how to be men or women anymore. Women have it a little bit easier in a particular way on this one. There's a little more flexibility, but much harder on another axis, and it ends up kind of evening out. So the men are disconnected from their hearts and their sensitivity, and so they sort of can't learn, and they don't have good models, and there's a lot of emasculation going on. And women feel something like too unsafe to really possess this. But in some sense, this is the masculine-feminine energy challenge. Where is challenge appropriate versus support? Where is, well, I think it's kind of flipped, visually flipped. It's just that I tend to put feminine on the left hand. There's, where is, what are the relative roles of kindness and you do you, I do me, we'll get strong. Let's deal with this. Like the relative role of those two. Right? That's another way to point at this same paradox. It's a gendered way. If you can't handle gendered way of thinkings, well, I'm going to drive you nuts. But but it's not necessary for what I'm saying. There's yet another one that I actually have a diagram I pulled up here when I hand drew. This is out of something called the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is sort of a map of, one way of thinking of it is as a map of states of consciousness. I found this immensely helpful, so I'll just highlight this thing here. So, yeah, there we go. So this thing here is a map of states of consciousness that you'll see the two horizontal dotted lines there. That's the lower one is the division between like the normal states of consciousness and usually what are called transpersonal states. And above the dotted line goes into non-dual states. And just below the non-dual line, you'll see two circles there corresponding to, right there it has the, let's see if I can bring this in. So this has the symbols for Jupiter and Mars drawn across there. Jupiter corresponds to the sphere of mercy and Mars to the sphere of severity or power. There's some lore in part of Western esoteric philosophy that goes into borrowing from a Jewish prayer. Ata malkut vegebora vegedula leolam amen is for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, amen. Which you might recognize from the Lord's Prayer. It appears that that part of the Lord's Prayer actually came from older Jewish material. I haven't done a ton of research. That might just be baloney I've been handed as part of the esoteric stuff. But the part where you're saying the power and the glory, ve gebura ve gedula, that is a reference to the sort of Mars Jupiter, the severity and mercy dynamic. And on that diagram, that line between the two of them, that is actually representing you could call it a psychological tension, but it's higher than psychological. The psyche is this lower stuff, like the sphere of the moon, that circle of the moon, corresponds to the subconscious mind. And then you'll have Mercury and Venus up there correspond to the mind and the heart, loosely speaking. That plus circle at the bottom is basically the body. It's the physical world, or normal states of consciousness. So getting up into these higher states of consciousness, that line between the Jupiter and Mars circles is holding a kind of tension that has to be resolved before crossing that dotted line up into this non-dual realm up here. And like so that's just a map. I found this map to be immensely helpful. It's like super insanely useful for making sense of all kinds of meditative and psychedelic states. It's immensely useful. I wish I understood the lines better, what is usually called the paths. I mentally know them, and I've crossed some of them very intentionally, but I feel like there's something there that's either made up weird lore or I just haven't experienced yet to make sense of. But yeah, that line between Jupiter and Mars, that tension, is exactly the paradox that I'm working with. The sense that on the Mercy Jupiter side, there's this sense of expansiveness. All that higher stuff, those see, these three that are higher. This is so that's the Sun there, and then Mars and Jupiter. Like those are corresponding to three aspects of the higher self. This is like the consciousness and the focal point, the balance. In very higher states of consciousness, reaching this state, this is the sense of remembering who you are as an individual, but beyond the physical. A lot of people have an experience when they reach that point of remembering their immortality beyond the material, beyond the physical body. And also having some kind of sense of it's also intertwined with what the physical body is. It's not a spiritual immortality that is beyond the body. It is that who you really are is just manifest through this body for now, but there's a kind of transcendence that happens there. If you've experienced this, you probably immediately know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, this probably sounds like semi-religious or mystical, weird mumbo-jumbo. I mean something that's extremely grounded. It's just as grounded as understanding what a table is. It's just the kind of thing that it means to be grounded in this is of a different type than just knowing what a table is, or knowing what a chair is, or knowing what a government is. It's like knowing what a you is. But those two higher aspects are corresponding to the will, that's Mars, and it's like the higher force and the higher heart or kindness, the higher expansiveness and gentleness, the letting go, the surrendering, right? And that's the Jupiter side. And the reason for corresponding them to Mars and Jupiter is esoteric things relating to Hermetic philosophy. It's interesting. I'll probably tell the Hermetic creation story at some point, and it relates to that picture. It's pretty, but it's not essential to what I'm saying. So there's this tension, which is closely related to this challenge of looking around the world. There are injustices. There are things that are wrong. There are things in me that I don't want. I want to root them out. I want to eliminate them. There are impurities. And this is not just a matter of casting judgment, but there's a recognition of, you know, I would rather kiss my girlfriend than kill her. And if there's a part of me that sneaks around in my subconscious that wants to create pain for her, yeah, in some general sense, everything is perfect and it's all wonderful. And part of that wonderfulness includes my willingness to go, okay, cool, that served me in some sense and I'm done. No more of that. I'm not interested in that. And same thing with her doing things with me. If she's going to be giving me some kind of, but why are you doing that again? And that's so annoying. It's like, okay, well, I'm annoying. Tough shit. I care about you, but I'm not going to let your hookiness control me. right? So the capacity to draw boundaries and the force of will and the willingness to say, that's your shit, this is my shit, I'm dealing with my shit, and if your shit crosses my line, I'm going to burn it. Right? So that's like ferocity. And this is the respect of sovereignty. But this respect of sovereignty, um, it can drift off in practice into this realm of, yeah, you do you, I'll do me, you're not my responsibility, have a nice life. There's a naturally disconnective element. It's not necessarily disconnective, but in practice it is. And then on the Jupiter side, I'm sort of amused with, like, we get a lot of our lore of Santa Claus from some of the legends of Jupiter and Jupiterian stuff. So it's kind of it's kind of fun to be talking about that aspect today. Like, Santa comes and brings you presents, and he's this jolly old elf, very kind and loving man. But you better watch out. You'd better not cry. You'd better not pout. I'm telling you why. There's some legends of Santa Claus where, like, the reason he would give, like, it used to be sticks and coal go in the stockings of bad little boys and girls. I don't know what the coal was about. I think originally this was a good thing for poor people, but the purpose of the sticks was so that the parents could beat the children with them. And there are some versions where either Santa Claus has a twin or Santa Claus just has another side to him, where he would steal bad boys and girls and take them to hell. Except in the Netherlands, where he would take them to Spain. All kinds of weird legends. So, anyway, that's up aside. So there's this business of ferocity and this intentionality of, no, we're going to be clean. We're not going to allow, like, I am not going to budge an inch on this. And then there's this other side, which is the recognition of suffering and the caring. This is not, oh, you poor thing, like, that's wet manipulation. But there is something very important about the fact that when you lose someone that you love, that it hurts. Right? There's something tragic about being caught in patterns where, like two people who really care about each other but are really upset with each other, don't know how to pull out of those patterns and to stop fighting enough to be able to really feel each other and to clear out what's going on there. There's something very sad about that. And there's a question of, well, what can we do? What do they need? Do they just need to suffer? Like, that seems unfortunate. Sometimes offering a helping hand really does help people. And so the spirit of kindness and generosity, there's a way where I can tell that in terms of this map, this map here is, I don't remember if I said this, but this is called the Tree of Life. This is specifically the Hermetic version of the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life originally comes from a branch of Jewish philosophy called Kabbalism. And then I think it was in the Renaissance that merged with Hermetic thought and did a whole bunch of development in contact with things like alchemy and astrology in order to become, eventually by the end of the 19th century, a map of consciousness development tuned to the various aspects of Western occult traditions. Mostly synthesized and pulled together into a particular format, the most commonly discovered format today, as far as I can tell, coming through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So a little bit of history there. So the thing where I have the planetary correspondences drawn here, the mapping of the planets to the various circles comes from the merger of astrological philosophy, Hermetic philosophy about the stars and the gods, to the to the Jewish map of, loosely speaking, God's plan to create absolute delight. So the so in terms of that map, in terms of the map of the tree of life, it seems very clear that when I map what I understand of that into my own experience, what that map would say is, oh, I haven't actually developed a whole lot of, like, there's more for me to develop in terms of the sphere of Jupiter. There's more to develop in terms of the realm of compassion. And it's very much something that I'm actively working on. And part of that is that I've leaned kind of heavily on an egoic version of it for a long time, trying to save the world, trying to make sure others are helped, trying to teach. Trying to pull out of that and center myself more in me. Let me focus on myself. Let me do my own development. Let me be centered. But then there is a confusion that shows up in me, which is related to, sometimes I can see very clearly what someone else's challenge is. I can see where they need to look if they want to be clear, if they want to open up. And I can be mistaken, and I'm like, all I can ever do is project when I look at other people and try to make judgments about what's going on for them. But like when like when somebody messages me saying, "Hey, I like really love some of what you've had to say in your videos or in this particular essay, and I was wondering if you could give me some thoughts about this problem I'm having with my mother, where like, I'm interacting with her and she's just being so unreasonable to me, and I hear what you're saying about like I'll reference something, but there's this like she just drives me nuts because she just won't respect recycling patterns, or I don't know. There's like some kind of thing there where, to me, I can look at that and go, oh, it sounds like you need your mother to act in a particular way for you to be okay, and you are choosing, for some deep sense of choice, you are choosing to allow yourself to be victimized by your lack of control over your mother's behavior, rather than recognizing and accepting that you don't like it. It sure sounds like the problem you're running into there is you're kind of reveling in how much you hate the fact that she is doing something you don't like and that you think she shouldn't. That person shouldn't is a loud signal that one has alienated from one's sphere of Jupiter powers. In this map, the sphere, sphere of Mars, the sphere of Mars, severity, of will, of power, is, I think that's where choice is. I'm working on understanding that one too, like getting in proper contact with what that map is talking about. I actually can see pieces of it. I can feel aspects of it. There's like this puzzle that describes well that I've seen, that I encounter in a bunch of other places. I just like this map because it's very tidy way of summarizing a lot of what I'm actually actively experiencing and wrestling with, which is the stuff I've talked about before, about choice. Like what does it mean to actually choose to do something? Like what does it mean to choose to open myself up to truth? Because like if I'm trying to change me, then I'm resisting the truth. So if I'm resisting the truth, that's true, and trying to change that, like how do I open up to and allow in more truth without trying to change anything? There's something very confusing about that. And it's not just a mental confusion. There's actually a disorientation in terms of something like, what does it mean to accept myself exactly as I am? I can kind of sort of do it. I'm much better at it than I was prior to heading to Mexico in November. And there's a real challenge there for me. So that challenge relates very closely to what is will. I don't know. I sometimes feel it. I sometimes am able to use it. I can feel it working me in the background. it's almost not my will. It's more like will comes through me, and then I sort of identify with it afterwards. Yeah, that was me. Reminded of this quote from Stephen Koss. You are not the king of your brain. You're the creepy guy standing next to the king saying, "A most judicious choice, sire." There's a lot of feeling like that. And to the extent that I remember and I pay attention and I get out of the way, it feels like, oh, I'm not the one doing this. And I feel a lot of ease when I make that kind of move. But then that shifts over to the Jupiter side, to allowing, opening. And I'm not, and I realize that there's a little bit of, I want to emphasize that I recognize that if I were trying to create a mathematical isomorphism between these various things that I'm talking about, they don't quite match up, because here I'm talking about will versus allowing, but I'm calling will something like leaving people alone, and whereas allowing maps somehow to trying to fix other people, and that's kind of an inconsistency in the mapping. I want to acknowledge that. I could try to make it work intellectually, but energetically, in terms of how it feels in my body, that feels like, no, that's the correct mapping. That is the correct mapping. It's something like the allowing is out of touch with the will to do my work. This is very much on my edge. This is an area where I'm sort of stumbling around. I can feel a puzzle. It's not just coming from the map of the Tree of Life. That was something that felt like this described something that I found relieving to have a description for. So there's this energetic tension that I experience between choice and allowing. When I lean towards allowing, going, okay, this is just a matter of letting the thing unfold, and it happens through me, that is fine, and I'll just let it happen through me. But part of letting it happen through me includes the way in which it empowers my egoic self. The way that when I stop making it so much about me and I just help other people, or rather I allow something to come through me that helps other people, who I am and my ability to enjoy my life feels richer. And that's important. There's something about the energy, vitality with which I do that, the willingness to not just surrender, but to surrender. Right? The capacity to devote. There's something in there that feels really important to me. Feels vitally important. I'm noticing there's a part of my mind that's tracking something like I'm speaking, like I'm actually speaking at an enormously concrete level energetically. I'm not naming the sensations in detail, the way in which they move through my chest and how they kind of electrify. But I am embodying them as I go back and forth between them, right? Like what this tension is between the allowing and the determination, and how there's a kind of natural resolution between them that I'm starting to feel. I don't remember if I mentioned this in the initial text that I wrote up here, but for me there's this metaphor that hovers in the background. I think I originally got the seed of the inspiration of this from a friend, Sarah McManus. The metaphor is parallax. That when resolving a paradox, that's like having there are two seemingly contradictory things that I'm trying to bring together. Rather, I can liken these to my two eyes. Like my eyes give very similar information for many things, but importantly, they're different. Rather than having them argue with each other about which one is right, or try to compromise about which one is right, instead, the right eye is 100% right. I mean, ignoring error, right? But the point is that what I get from my right eye is considered correct, as is the perspective of my left eye. And the disagreement between the two of them becomes alchemized. It becomes sort of fused together into a larger whole that develops a new sense. And that is the sense of depth perception. That's not something I get through one eye or the other, and it's not even through both. It's through a result of 100% of one and the other in their paradoxical union produces visual impression of depth, among some other cues. Um, uh, but the thing that I can't do with one eye that I can do with both, like that's something that occurs very early on. The term for the disagreement between the two eyes is parallax. And you say there is a parallax between the left and right eye. So paradox, I wrote an essay a while back. I might see about grabbing that and making it more public at some point. I'm going to sort of flesh out my various public posts and just collect them, I think. I've been feeling an itch to do that lately. This would, eventually I bet these are all going to go on Relentless Dawn, because that's just a place that I can easily put them right now, relentlessdawn.wordpress.com. There's some old essays up there currently. So in the same way, here I am looking at Mars and Jupiter as these representations of these psychological forces. I could just as well say will and allowing, higher will and higher allowing, that I feel a tension between them. Well, can I view these as like the right and left eyes? Rather than finding a balance point where I try to be nice with people, but I draw a line for bullshit. Instead, have, and like the other side of the compromise, the other way of describing it would be, this kind of place where, I don't want to really cater to your traumas, but I understand that you're trapped in them and that there's kind of a difficulty here. So like, I'll get a little involved and try to help, but like not too much. Like that's like trying to balance somewhere along that line between the Mars-Jupiter spheres. I don't think it's a matter of finding the place in between the two of them, but rather of allowing power to flow all along that line. And in doing so, alchemizing them into a new kind of depth perception. I say this having experienced things that go above that line, like the going up into what's often called the supernal realm, going into non-dual spaces. I've experienced getting shot above that dotted line. I won't say I've mastered it. I certainly don't know how to relate that to what somebody means by enlightenment. I'm sort of tempted to say something like, yeah, sure, I have experienced enlightenment. I don't think I want to say that that is a stabilized state for me. And that there's something, I can see something that I might want to call enlightenment, but I think the concept is really confused. But I guess, but because I've seen something, I guess you could say I have been enlightened, so I am. Yeah, it feels very weird to talk about those terms because they're so culturally laden right now. But it is talking about that axis. It is talking about the types of things that people experience and embody and learn to fully own. So, like when we're referring to enlightenment or cultivation of wisdom that matters, which is to say, cultivation of wisdom. My impression is that alchemizing the tension between those two somehow stabilizes the process of going above that dotted line up into the supernal realm, into the non-dual aspects. I really could have used that up there. It was miserable for me because there were a lot of ways where I didn't know how to balance those powers, those forces. And so my transition between the realm beyond time and the realm within time, that was rough for me. That was really rough. And I think having those two alchemized, like having the parallax between force and mercy, having that alchemized into a new kind of depth perception would have let me see the path through and would have made that so much easier. And I expect that it will continue to make it easier. So that's a lot of what I'm grappling with. But I want to acknowledge, when it's looping all the way back, that not all the way back, but a good chunk of the way back, that this, I imagine this sounds very abstract, very, very abstract. Okay? I think on a very concrete level, when it looks at something like, and part of the issue is that I'm trying to resolve, what does it look like in terms of what words I say and how I breathe and how I look and how I embody? What does this do? I am asking the question that is immediately before and like is causally before, what actions do I perform? What words do I say? What social structures do I engage in? Those are secondary. They are manifestations that are downstream of addressing the things that I'm pointing at. But because a lot of our culture's ways of using our minds focus on the output that we can see in the bottom world, in the material world, there's this, I get the impression of talking about that which is causally before what manifests in the physical world sounds abstract, the same way that talking about generalizations sounds abstract. But when I'm talking about something about, okay, there is this energy that rises up in me that I can use, that I experience it as very closely tied to masculine erotic energy. I don't think it's the same thing, but I think it's really closely tied, and maybe it secretly is. Like, these might be masculine and feminine erotic energies well cultivated into their higher forms, alchemized into their higher forms, and then created into an erotic union. It's worth noting, by the way, that this path here between Jupiter and Mars in the Hermetic Kabbalah, that gets a correspondence of a tarot card. Like, all of them do. All of those lines get tarot cards associated with them. That particular one, the most commonly named tarot card there is Strength, but in the Thoth Tarot, which is the one that Aleister Crowley designed in an attempt to match the energies of the paths more closely with the entire Kabbalistic and Hermetic system, as well as with his vision of a new world beyond the basically the patriarchal one. He renamed that card Lust. That's not just, oh, strength is the same as lust. He's saying the strength being referred to there is erotic, and it is a powerful erotic dynamism that is, it's essential to the alchemization of exactly that energy. Now, I don't know how accurate he is, I just think that it's an interesting historical note that there is actually something very erotic about that connection. There's actually something very erotic about at least two, arguably all three, of the horizontal lines of this map. This top one here corresponds to the Empress, which is often associated with fertility, with the goddess Venus. One down here, oops, the coloration's doing something funny. The one down here below the veil of forgetting within the normal realm, the connection between the heart and the mind, that one corresponds to the tower, to Mars. There's lots of tension there, a sort of very forceful energy. Whether you want to call that one erotic is like arguable. I mean, they're all arguable, I suppose. That one feels the most arguable to me. But the tension between the Jupiter and Mars line there is like that's there's sex in that line. So to me, it seems very plausible to highlight those as extremely accessible through, maybe the same as, unsure, but certainly extremely accessible through masculine and feminine erotic power. So, but the thing is that those are energies that move through the body. There's something about, how do I there's a force behind the masculine erotic energy in the body. It can bring it into the eyes, into the breath. It very easily fuels the ego. It creates this energy, this vitality, this um, kind of force. It's a little more difficult to raise in this body I have, from what I've been able to tell, to raise feminine erotic energy and move that around. But I can feel it, and in the sensuality and what's involved in the opening. And to hold that as well. To have both of those strong and active in my system at the same time, heightened and then in dialogue, in a way that actually feels like energetic fucking in my own system. I've experienced this in different cases, and when this dynamism starts to really go, there is definitely a kind of energetic resolution that starts to emerge in terms of this whole thought, because the thoughts appear after the energy. The thoughts always, like, any kind of thoughts that I observe bouncing around in my mind, I can always see where the power is in the body that fuels it, like steam coming up and running the turbines of a steam engine. The steam is always first. Yes, the engine is there, but the engine is irrelevant without the steam. And so in a very important way, the fuel is the key part of a steam engine, not the design of the steam engine, although that matters. So I find that if I bother to look, I can always see what the energy is in my body that fuels the thoughts. And all of these thoughts about, well, do I cut the bullshit and say, look, you do you, I do me, I'm not interested? Or do I lean into the compassion of, I see your tension, I see your pain? What I find is that there's a natural resolution that as I let the energies distinguish, strengthen, and merge in myself, there's a very natural kind of resolution that emerges that feels sort of like, what am I somatically a yes to? What am I somatically a no to? And how do I hold the space for leaning into the yes and protecting myself from the no, and holding that firm regardless of what kind of clawing people do in order to try to get at me? Or, and this is closer to my edge, the following part is a lot closer to my edge, and this relates closely to some of the tensions that appeared for me earlier this morning. What about the places where I am a yes for something and I'm encountering some kind of resistance? Now here it gets paradoxical, because I want to respect others' sovereignty. I don't want to just bowl them over. That's really important to me. But I also want to be a firm, strong yes to what I want. And when what I want is what the other wants as well, except that they have resistance, how can I meet them in that? I'm going to put it over here now. We are connected. How to do that with force, with strength, with clarity, but with respect for sovereignty, I don't know. And I can tell that trying to figure it out will just create the same spinning and emotional post-processing that doesn't actually resolve the energetic question. So I feel very on the edge, and I'm excited about it. So I feel like I'm coming into a kind of immensely kind, but immensely relentless power. Learning to embody it. That feels really good. A lot of energy, a lot of energy. So, yeah. So that ends up being too abstract to follow. Alas, this wasn't for you. But it does ground out at the level of, well, how, when I'm teaching people how to live better lives, how am I orienting to that? Yeah, it's a really good question. When people show up to that kind of question, are they showing up because they want rescuing and I'm willing to play the rescuer? Well, how about I just not How about I not even advertise that way? How about instead I show up and say, I would love to offer some perspective that has helped me. If it helps you, wonderful. I am super happy to make this as clear as I reasonably can. I enjoy that. Let me meet you in it. And if you take it and you make your life wonderful, great. That's your work. And I'm pleased to have offered you a tool. So it's a place where in my heart, I actually feel a lot of the resolution to that tension. It's just about embodying it more deeply and letting that reorganize my thoughts, and deepening it. Deepening the line of lust in my own body. that Jupiter-Mars connection. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, so you got this far. I hope you enjoyed. Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening.